again, good morning, Sensei. So we're talking today about your time when you were in Okinawa, when you lived in Okinawa in the mid-1960s, and you spent a considerable amount of time with Nagamine Sensei, with Grandmaster Nagamine. So around 1965, you spent 8 or 9 months there, but you had a bit of a journey beforehand. You had decided to go to Japan to maybe get to the roots. You did a little side trip. You ended up in Okinawa. Well, you ended up in Japan, you ended up in Okinawa, and then you had another side trip. So you were gone for quite a while. In the early days, what brought you to this? Why did you want to go? Like, why? It wasn't something that everybody did. Why did you want to go? What brought you to Okinawa?
Okay, I was getting quite involved in karate and also in the spiritual part of karate. And although I had a good teacher here, Tsuruka Sensei, who was way ahead of any of us and could have taught me for many years still. But I figured that to really experience it, I should go to the culture in which it developed, rather than living a Western culture and trying to study in Eastern martial art. And that I was still single at the time and unattached, and I thought this would be a good time to go. So the other thing, I'd never been away from my parents' home, and that was a good opportunity to do it. And I'd grown up in Europe, and I'd been to Europe a number of times in visits, but I'd never been to the Orient, so that's why I decided to go there. So I got very sick. I had mononucleosis actually for well over a month in just before I went, and I had to. So I figured, okay, I was very weak then when I came, because I spent a month in the hospital, months recuperating at home, but I still wasn't in good shape. So if I went to Japan and studied at a Japanese dojo in that kind of shape, I thought that'd be a total flop. So I also put a month of R&R in Hawaii on the way. And that's when I met Morita Sensei, who was Tsuruka Sensei Senior, and he advised me eventually to go to Okinawa rather than to Japan. As he said, in Okinawa, karate is many centuries old, and karate was only 50 years at the time. And he said the Japanese haven't grown up in karate yet. The Okinawans have. They respect each other. They accept each other's differences. The Japanese are not. They're basically at each other's throat, every style fighting every other style. So he said the Okinawans are far more mature. Go to Okinawa instead. So he gave me a letter of introduction to Nagamine Sensei, and that's how I ended up there.
And how long did you spend with Morita Sensei?
A month at the time.
And you spent that time, you started, now beforehand, you hadn't started doing Matsubayashi, you were doing...
No, he introduced me actually to Matsubayashi. I did Fukigata H, Fukigata Ni with him, and I spent a month in Japan, actually traveling through Japan from Tokyo on south to Kagoshima, which is the southern tip. And I was, for 2 weeks, I was waiting for a visa to go to Okinawa because it wasn't part of Japan then. It was under American military rule, and I needed permission both from the Americans and from the Okinawan civilian government to come. So I needed a visa from them, and it took 2 weeks to get it. So I spent 2 weeks in Tokyo and then 2 weeks traveling south. I spent a couple of days in Hiroshima and Nagoya, Kobe, and so on the way. Eventually took a boat from Kagoshima to Naha, which was about a 20-hour boat trip.
So when you got off the boat, you were in Okinawa, you make your way to the dojo. I'm assuming that's one of the first things you went, you went right to the dojo. Yeah. And did you meet Nagamine Sensei off the bat, or were you introduced to any other seniors?
Nagamine Sensei had just left, I think, the day before to go to Japan for a week. So I met Omina Sensei, who spoke fairly good English, and I showed him the letter of introduction to Nagamine Sensei, and he said, "Yeah, it's no problem. You can stay with us until he comes back, and attend the classes and so on." And he also arranged for accommodation. I spent a couple of nights in a hotel, and then he got me an apartment with Makishi's family. They owned an apartment building. So I had an apartment for the first couple of months.
Nice.
Until Christmas time when Soke went to Japan to study at the university in Tokyo, and his room became available, and Sensei asked me if I wanted to move there instead. So of course I jumped at the opportunity.
Definitely. So what was training like? So when you were training with Omine Sensei, or Omine Sensei was the first one you met, he was teaching the classes?
Yes, he was teaching classes.
Who else was teaching?
Well, Soke was teaching an afternoon class with the school kids.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a class in the morning, which normally was taught by Nagamine Sensei, but in his absence, I think Omine did a few times, and otherwise the people just trained. And then the evening class was a man named Matsubayashi Ryu, who regularly took the evening class.
Mm-hmm.
So those 4 classes a day at the dojo. And then, of course, there was free time where people dropped in and practiced as they had time. And I'd practice with them, or I'd practice on my own, but sometimes took some private lessons from some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. So I didn't have much money. I was on a very limited budget. And I wanted to have my money stretch as long as possible. So I never went out much and did all the sightseeing and tourist type of things. I spent most of my time at the dojo. And so even out of boredom, I trained a lot. So it was about 8 to 10 hours a day of training I got in there.
Wow, that's significant. So you're at the dojo. What was your first experience with Nagamine Sensei when he came back? And you're at the time you were the only non-Japanese training at the dojo?
No, there were some Americans from the Naha Air Base, and they dropped in. But the Americans, in most cases, were kind of sporadic because they were doing a tour in Vietnam and then came back for R&R for a couple of weeks, and then they went back to Vietnam and things like that. So it was they weren't as regular. There was a couple of them that actually lived in Naha, support people. One was Captain Rennie Parisi, a dentist who also looked after Sensei's teeth, and he was at the dojo, and he'd been there for a while already, and we became friends. So it's there were other Americans, but not too many.
So what was your experience when you first met Nagamine Sensei? What was your first impression? Coming from North America, where we have this idea of the samurai. We have these movies, and especially in the 1960s, maybe there's not as much cultural interaction. You had this idea of what Nagamine Sensei was, and then all of a sudden,
I had a wrong picture because Soroka Sensei told us that the masters won't even talk to you until you have at least a 6-degree black belt and all this kind of thing. And so when I met Nagamine Sensei, he was totally different from that. He was very friendly and big smile on his face, and which he had most of the time. And it was a very totally different from what I had expected.
Mm-hmm.
So thank goodness, because if he'd been like some of the people I met in Japan, like I visited the Shotokan in Japan and several of the other schools. If he'd been anything like that, I don't think I would have stayed in karate.
Well, you see pictures of Nagamine Sensei, when he's training. Of course, he has that serious look. He has that serious, karate face. But I know you've told me many times that he was always smiling. He's very happy, very jovial, very friendly. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of his day-to-day activities? What was Nagamine Sensei like as a person, not just on the dojo but off the dojo? His relationship with his family or his relationship with his students?
Well, in the pictures that you usually see of him formal, it's like any Japanese, very serious and that's the impression you get of him.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't like that in real life, and some of the pictures I've sent to you and Mike so showed that. We had a number of parties. The Okinawans like parties and celebrations, and they celebrate at any excuse. although they're not Christians, they still celebrate Christmas and things like that. It's any excuse will do. So this is something that we had parties at the dojo where he simply put the tatami out on the floor and a couple of benches and a table or something, and we'd sit around and have some drinks. And I don't know, Mike. Yeah, there's
there we go.
there's two of them. The one on the left is actually at New Year, 1966. And the other one is the going away party that he had for me and a couple of other people in June '66.
And those are those both in the dojo?
They're both in the dojo, yes. The one looks, the one on the left looks to the front, the shindan of the dojo, and the other one looks to the back door. You just sort of covered it up with the screen. But you see the bench in front of it. You see there's plenty of alcoholic drinks. The guy on the very extreme left had already fallen asleep. Nagamine Sensei was in the. Actually, he and I'm sitting right behind him. Actually, in the picture, you see my head over on top of his head. And the two of us were the only one in house kimonos because we were actually living there. Everybody else was in street clothes. So, but that's the way he usually was. I mean, he was serious about karate, but life in general, he was a very happy and content person.
So dojo life would be very relaxed as well. If he's that personality, dojo life would be very relaxed. So classes weren't necessarily, very strict, very formal. They were more of a relaxed, sharing atmosphere.
The classes were formal, and we had formal meditation before the class as well. So he took his karate seriously, but we sat together afterwards and talked about philosophy and so on. The number of the students went, Nagamine Sensei got some tea and we sat around and chatted, and Omina Sensei would sometimes translate one of the other Okinawans who spoke reasonable English. And they had, they would discuss all kinds of philosophical questions, and I asked them too, and he answered them. So it was a much more informal atmosphere after the meeting. And that the class itself was fairly formal, but it wasn't hard in that sense, not the way we push it or the Japanese do. And even a lot of the Okinawans I see on YouTube now, very hard and tough knuckles and hitting Makiwara hard and so on. It's Nagamine Sensei didn't really have anything much in the way of calluses on his hands. When you look at his hands, normally you'd have to look very closely to see that he was even doing karate. And actually, I'm told that many people who met him the first time said, Nagamine, are you by any chance related to the karate master Nagamine? Because he looked so unlike it. And I remember going to a restaurant sometimes with him, and we were walking. He was in street clothes and just as the Japanese sandals, barefoot, but still a suit on and so on. And I looked at him, head smaller than I was, and said, "He's supposed to be one of the most dangerous men in the world. It sure doesn't look like it." So it was. He was like that.
So Sensei was very, very friendly, very relaxed. How was he with he was obviously the same way with his family, but you were lucky enough, you were fortunate enough to have some interaction because you lived at the dojo. You went with his family to different places, or you were involved in different meetings, maybe in the dojo as well, because Sensei was part of the Okinawan Karate Federation.
Yeah, he was actually the president of the Okinawan Karate Federation while I was there, and I often saw meetings with him and people from some of the other karate styles, like Yagi Meitoku was there. Some of the Uechi people and things like that. So it was, so I met quite a few. I met Uechi Sensei and Yagi Meitoku at his dojo.
You would be practicing off to the side, and they're having their meeting on the floor. And
No, they actually, there was a little side room. Those of you who've been in Okinawa, it's actually been enlarged, and it's the entrance to the, there's a much larger lounging area now than they used to be, but that's where they usually met, and I had the main floor to practice.
Hang on, I'm getting questions here. There was a question that was just asked about your kata that you learned before you went to Okinawa. You said it was Fukigata ni from Morita Sensei?
Yes.
You didn't learn any of the Pinan. Well, you had, I suppose, learned the Pinan kata from your previous style.
Yes, but of course they were different, and I basically realized I was studying a different martial art. You know, the difference between Matsubayashi and what I'd done in Canada was so drastic. It was like studying a different martial art. So I just sort of said, okay. I mean, I studied some languages before, and I had one teacher who was very good, and he said, never relate the new language to the old one that you know. Every language is complete in its own. It has its own grammar, its own way of saying things, and so on. And you just accept that's the way it is, rather than saying, oh, how come they do it this way when we do it this way? How come they don't do it this way? Type of thing. And I applied the same thing to karate, and I just, the first thing that I was taught, basically, everything is natural. Because Soroka had, okay, from here to here you have to a certain way, and this is when you start turning, and this is, and so I asked the same question in Okinawa, and they just said, well, you're here and you go there, what's your problem? It was very, you don't question it. You just go there, and that's the thing that I found with, I mean, there were a few details you have to twist at the end, and Nagamine Sensei explained to me why, that it's the impact, and it's the impact that destroys your bones and the opponent's bones if you don't watch out. If his bones are stronger than yours, you're going to break your own hitting his arm. So, but if you turn your hand and you distribute the stress around your bone while you apply it at a single place in his, so his bone gets broken, yours is distributed, so therefore it's stronger. Okay, and that kind of thing. So he went into quite a few technical explanations that you don't get anywhere else. A lot of books say certain things. You have to do this, but it never says why or what the effect is if you don't. And that's. I asked many questions, and I said to him, Sensei, I'm sorry, I'm asking all these questions. I know if I was in Okinawa, I wouldn't do that. But when I go home, my students will ask me the questions, and I have to have the answers. And he said, no problem, just ask whatever you want, and yeah. So I did that, and sometimes questions I think which would have gotten me kicked out of somebody else's dojo.
So he was very forgiving for that. I mean, he understood that you had to go back.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I'll give you one example. There's the old question of why is that all the different martial arts and the different styles of karate are just one path to the top. I mean, we see at the top of the mountain, we all see the same moon. So it's sort of like this. Okay, there's all the different styles, and they all go there, and then we at the top we see the same moon. And I said to him, okay, Sensei, you are a master. Do you see the moon? Which I'm sure would have gotten me kicked out of any other dojo. And he said, well, the mountains are always drawn smoothly, but the real mountain is not like that. It's like this, there's peaks and valleys as you go to the top. He said, sometimes I'm on a peak and I can see the moon, but then to get to the next peak, I have to go through a valley and I don't see the moon. He says, I don't know how far up the slope I am. He says, I'll know when I get to the top. So that kind of thing, and it sort of taught me humility too, because here's the master saying, okay, I haven't reached it yet either. So how can we say we are masters? Okay, when we're even further down the slope. And that kind of thing is because of his humility, and I really got to like him. And when you see a flaw in somebody, he or she becomes human. And you realize you can get there too if you want to. if you regard them as gods, like Frank Grant once said, when he got to Okinawa, he expected Nagamine to sort of walk a foot above the floor. Yeah, no, if it's like that, you know you can never reach that point.
Mm-hmm.
If that other person or your idol or whatever you want to call it is human, you realize with some effort you can get there too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we have to keep in mind when we teach our own students as well.
And you saw Nagamine Sensei on a regular basis. You saw both
Oh, yeah,
his,
I mean, I had every morning class with him, except the occasional time when he was too hungover to teach the morning class. And to get from my room to his down to the dojo, I had to go around the corner. I don't know if Mike, can you put up the
picture of
picture
that, Michael? Yeah,
of the dojo?
Mm-hmm. We'll see if we can get that and post that up.
Okay, I'll see if I can find it. What I mean.
Oh, here we go. There we go, Sensei.
Yeah. Okay. You see the dojo entrance, and there's that little room just above it with the railing on it, on the window. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that was my room. Where you see all the big grids, there was a walkway going toward the stairs that went down to the dojo.
Mm-hmm.
And inside that, there was actually his bedroom. There was no door on it. It was just the room. And sometimes when he was had too late a night, and I just heard that the voice under the blankets, "Mr. Baehr, please you teach," because I was going down to the dojo to open up at 6:30 and sweep the floor and all this kind of thing, get it ready for the 7 o'clock class. And but in most cases he came down with me as well, and he swept the floor while we opening the dojo with me. So it's the sensei should never be above doing all those chores himself as well.
He, again, you talked about him being very humble, very down to earth, and he would sweep the floor with you. He would, do these everyday things that sometimes, again, like you said, we have that idea of the master we put on the pedestal, but he would do all these average everyday things, and he was very, very genial. He didn't put on airs about his title, for instance. Oh, where'd you go?
Yeah, he always wore a plain black belt in the class. He didn't wear a red belt or anything like that. That was only for special occasions, like demonstrations in official things where he represented the association and all this kind of thing. So, and he only put on a red belt in the dojo when I asked him to take a picture for sending it home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I still don't like wearing the belt with the stripes on it unless I do a grading or something like this where it's something official. Normally, as a matter of fact, a couple of times in the dojo I've even put on a white belt. It doesn't really matter, but the students know what rank I am. We all knew what rank Nagamine Sensei was. That was it. Why do I have to constantly advertise it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Omina was very tough in this. Because he always insisted that the belt was part of your gi, and he abhorred these belts that so many of people wear that look almost white because they're so worn. He said, when your belt starts showing these signs of getting worn, you should throw it out and get a new one, because as part of your gi, you wouldn't wear a gi that's tattered. Why would you wear a belt? So I still follow that, and I don't like the belts when you see mostly white and because they're all worn.
It's a little bit more maybe of a Japanese thing than Okinawan, I suppose. Having that frayed belt, having that.
Yeah, showing how see, this is a show-off type of thing. Okay, look how much long I've been practicing, and I went through the same thing. When I got my yellow belt, we did everything we could to. We used the hammer to hammer it. We washed it. We hit it against the tree and so on, just so it wouldn't look so damn new. Later on, you don't care about that anymore. But at that time, we most of us go through that phase. But by the time you get to black belt, you should be beyond it.
So Sensei, you spent what, 8 or 9 months in Okinawa,
eight, eight,
um,
8 months. So.
training
Well,
fairly often. Yeah.
yeah,
And,
four times a day, and once on Sunday. Sunday we
mhm.
only had the morning class from 8 to 9:30, then, and then the rest of the time was my own.
Now, when I say the training was hard, it wasn't necessarily maybe physically demanding, or you know.
No, it wasn't physically demanding. I think the sensei sort of expected you to put in whatever you felt you could, and the consequences are that the harder you work, the better you get.
Mhm.
Yeah, so he expected you to understand that, because we were all adults. There weren't any kids in the class except for Soka's schoolboy class. He was a
Mhm.
schoolboy himself at the time. He was only 19 or so when I got there. So he was still in high school at that point. So we had essentially, one of the main differences I think in the exercise I see is the fact that the whole class could do the entire set of exercises. Okay?
Mhm.
Yes, you did 100 punches or whatever, but you could take it easier. Okay, it wasn't like trying to do 100 push-ups where half the class is lost after about 20 or 25 of them. Yeah, you did exercises that everybody could do. You could take it easier if you weren't in good shape. You could do it really hard if you were in good shape, and it could take the hell out of you. It's the same
Mhm.
in practicing kata. But basically, Nagamine Sensei's idea was that the best exercise for karate is karate. It's not all kinds of other training,
Mhm.
because the kind of muscles you need to develop are developed. So spend more time on kata, do the kata with all your heart,
Mhm.
and really put an effort into that, and you will get strong.
Mhm.
Now, there was some weight training at the end of the class. One of the Germans once put it very nicely. He said, at the end of the class, you still had to crawl out of the dojo on your nipples. That's, yeah, it doesn't matter how tired you are at the end. But he felt at the beginning you cannot do hard exercise, because if you're too tired already to do a proper job with the katas, then you're wasting your time.
Mhm.
So you should warm up, basics, then kata. And his distribution of how you should do the class was 20% warm-ups and basics, 60% kata, 20% weight training, strength training, sit-ups and all this kind of thing,
Mhm.
knee bends with weights on the shoulders and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then they at the end have a few minutes of cool down where we just do easy kicks, alternate with the hands behind the back, and all this kind of thing, just to sort of loosen up again, and
Mhm.
get the circulation going again, and then ending at the Caesar position with deep breathing, just to get our heartbeat back to normal, and all this kind of thing. So that was his distribution of the class. Now Soke changed the proportions later on to suit North Americans, because North Americans didn't like kata. So he shortened the kata to about half of that, making 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Mhm.
Yeah, which I'd never actually liked, and I didn't follow that. I always feel that. Now, what happens in the West is we do warm-ups, and we do them too long usually, and then
Mhm.
we do katas, and then we run out of time at the end. So we never do any cool-downs.
Mhm.
And we don't strictly say, okay, this is for this, divide it into this 20, 60, 20, or 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Mhm.
We extend the katas, and then, oh, yes, it's time to quit and get off the floor. The next class is waiting. Type of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's no good. It should be a much more structured class like that, with
Mhm.
proper distribution of exercises.
So when you were practicing with Nagamine Sensei, did you ever cover application of kata? Like, you spent so much time doing kata. Was
No,
it just kata repetition, like just going over the kata over and over again, or did you ever
yeah,
talk about application, or how the moves are, what the moves are?
no, and I think the difference in Okinawan or Japanese teaching, Oriental teaching in general, is they don't explain things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they expect you to practice, and then as you get more advanced and you understand it more instinctively, you'll figure out the uses of it.
Mm-hmm.
They never explain the uses. What we call now the classical bunkai didn't exist. It existed only in the demonstration team. You see some old videos, and I've taken some myself with people doing the Yakuza or the kata bunkai. But they only existed for the demonstration team that actually did this in demonstrations. The class never did that. We didn't learn those things. So it's a later development, because I think in the West we constantly ask, what's the meaning of this move? What's the meaning of this move? And then Soke finally put down and said, well, this is what it is. And he often would change his mind about it. Next time you ask him, he'd give you a different explanation. Everyone says, oh, they changed that again. No, they didn't change it. It didn't mean it in the first place. It's us who pushed for it, and that's why it became. And if you test it on katas in Okinawa, they're very precise. Do you end up where you start? Are your angles all correct and so on? Your movements have to be quite precise. In the West, we are not that tough. So okay, he knows the pattern of the kata. It's okay, and he looks reasonably good. So you have to test on more things, because otherwise the tests get too easy. In Okinawa, they weren't that easy. They were quite tough. You had to end up where you start, or you failed. And that's so from that point of view, they were tough, but not that you spent 6 hours doing the black belt test or something like some people do here.
You get much more relaxed.
I mean, teachers know students by the time they go for grading. So why do you give them big long tests to see what they know? You already know what they know. It's just to sort of make it tough on the students and so on. And you know how many students get nervous during a test. They'll do their best in the class or not. And you know what they do. So if they put on a big show during the test, you know that's phony. That's not the way they really are. You fail the students on what they do in class, not on the test.
Now you've talked about this too. You've seen a change over the past number of years, where your original training with Nagamine Sensei was one way, and then when you came back to North America, over time you see things change, adapt, adjust. I mean, when you were in Okinawa, Matsubayashi wasn't really that old. It was only a few decades old, but now you've had more time maybe away from Okinawa, and you've seen some changes. How do you see that? How do you see that development from when you were training with Nagamine Sensei to now, or the 70s, the 80s, and 90s? How do you see that evolution?
I think the first big change came after 1972, when Okinawa became part of Japan again. And the Okinawan and the Japanese Karate Association started to work together and all this kind of thing. I mean, with Okinawa having 1 million people and Japan having almost 100 million people, you can see who's the stronger, who's going to be the dominant. It's like Canada and United States, when Trudeau Senior said, if a mouse sleeps in bed with an elephant, he has to be quite careful. So I think a lot of the changes were made. Shotokan was so successful in the rest of the world. Everybody said, okay, we have to do it like them because they're successful. And I've warned the Okinawans against that several times. Once in New York, actually, Sensei Trombley was with me at the time. And Soke asked me to explain to the other Okinawans, I think Taira was there, and Wakishi, and a few others, why they shouldn't be changing the old ways. And I told them that they are the original masters of karate. Why are they being taught by the students? And forced to change by the students, and that's the way I still feel, actually. The Okinawans were successful with karate for centuries. Obviously their karate was good, and their methods were good. And Nagamine Sensei was actually very open to innovation and adjustments and things. Even Arakaki, his own teacher, had already said, look at the scientific side of things and so on, and analyze the technique and improve them if you see it happening. And apparently Nagamine Sensei, in developing Matsubayashi, did a lot of things. Like he had people step in suit and then walk on paper to determine the natural step length of a human being. That's how he developed the Shizentai Dachi that we had, and things like that. You know, other exercises, like we had a very tough exercise on the legs. You sort of kneel in seiza position and then bend all the way back and then come up again. Somebody sitting on your legs. Some of you may have done that too, because the Japanese do that. And Captain Farisi, as a medical man, had seen in the medical magazine that this was actually very bad on the knees, and explains why. The upper and lower calf muscles form fulcrum that forces the knees apart when you put that much stress on it, and in the long run you damage your knee joint. And that's and we explained this to Nagamine Sensei, and we never did that exercise again. So he was very willing to change things, and was quite open to this, but you had to give him a good reason. Another time, since I had 4 different classes and everybody had differences, like it would count differently. They would expect you to do one thing and the other one another thing, and so on. And I got frustrated because I took all 4 classes and I had to change my thinking for every class. The people in that class didn't have any problems because they always took the same class from the same instructor, but I had 4 different instructors every day. And I finally said to Nagamine Sensei, "You are our master, can't you sort of lay down the law?" And he said, "No, I don't want to do that because it'll stifle their own development. They've been practicing karate for many, many years. They have some very good ideas. Yeah, I want them to explore this and to come up with things." And that's, so he was quite open to this kind of thing. He was the only one doing one shoe at the time. I never saw anybody else do it. And he asked me once what I thought of the kata, because I watched him doing it. And I said, "I've tried that, but I can feel a sort of discontinuity." And he said, "Oh, how?" And I said, "Well, you have a strong, you have a senkutsu dachi and a punch, a very strong technique. You slide a punch, and then you do a shuto, which is a relatively weak technique. And that sequence bothers me. Why would you follow up a strong technique with a weak one?" And he just sort of said, "A very interesting observation," he said. Yeah. In other words, he wanted you to think about these things, not just accept it, but he wanted you to think and so on. And that was different from many of the masters. Even with me wearing a white belt all the time, even after I got my shoda, he felt think about these things and get try to understand. So that was something very different about him, that Soka didn't always allow that. When you question something, he felt attacked at times. And that was one of the unfortunate things with him.
Talking about Nagamine Sensei again, tournaments. We as Matsubayashi, some people do tournaments, but generally people are saying, well, no, we don't do tournaments. What was Nagamine Sensei's? I mean, if he's open and open to new ideas, what was his thought process on competition?
There was a number of objections he had. A couple of them are mentioned in the book. I mean, the book's very mild, and its own explanations to me were a lot stronger. And he like in the book, he mentions that the difficulty in judging a tournament, because the things happen so quickly. Even with 2 referees and 4 judges, you don't see everything. You can't quite see who hit whom first, who was faster, and so on, because it's basically almost instantaneous. And that is something that he mentions in the book. But to me, he mentioned other things. For instance, tournaments are out. You want to win, and you have to defeat the other one. Okay? When in reality, a true victory is only if both of you win. that's the only way to really settle the conflict is when both of you get something out of it that you can live with, and you've both learned something from it. And he felt sparring, which he was in favor of, should be to help each other learn, not to defeat the other person. And the ego building, I'm the champion, I'm the best, I beat everybody else type of thing. That's exactly opposite of what martial arts are trying to accomplish, the demolishment of the ego. And that all those things came into it, that as far as he was concerned. And he said once, he drew a little diagram, which unfortunately I didn't send, but it's, he saw a circle and said, start or basics. No, it's just a start. And he had a tournament and basics and understanding, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. And he said, you go to a tournament, there is no path from there to enlightenment. You have to come back to basics and start over again. And develop it on that. So he figured tournaments are dead-end street. It's something that you do for a little while just to find out what it's like and to experience it. But then as you get serious about karate, you drop that. And that's why he was very upset about the very strong stress on tournament we have, and rather than on developing karate in the psychological way as well, that we become better human beings, be able to cope with stresses in life and things like that. That's where he felt the development of karate should go, not physically. And I was thinking of that too, because karate needs sentenashi. In karate, we don't have the first attack. And so it's a defensive art. And in a tournament, somebody has to attack, or else there's no fight. Okay? So one of the persons definitely goes against it. As a matter of fact, I've been in tournaments. I fought in tournaments before I went to Japan, and you can get penalized for not being aggressive enough, which is totally against the spirit of karate, Okinawan karate, anyway. So these are things that he pointed out to me, and that is, and of course the fact that there are rules which won't be in the street. In the street, you attack whatever is open to you. It's not that, oh no, you can't poke the eyes, you can't kick the guy in the testicles, and things like that. You cannot have certain techniques because they're just too dangerous. And in one of the programs, actually, I think it was the BBC had a program on martial arts, and they quoted him. I still have the book for that companion book. And he said something that karate is not meant for tournaments. It's just too dangerous. True karate is too dangerous to use in a tournament. And of course, jiu-jitsu was the same thing. You had to dumb it down into judo with rules and with certain techniques not permitted, just to be able to do it as a competition. And karate was never done that way. Now we have no contact karate or light contact karate and all this kind of thing. But it's with the wrong spirit. It's not the karate that he felt. As a matter of fact, he told me once that the Japanese put karate back 100 years when they introduced tournaments. Because he said 100 years ago we had to fight for real and had to defend our life. Nowadays, he said all the battles, practically all the battles are psychological. They're not physical anymore. And that's what we have to emphasize in karate. That's where karate should be going.
And Nagamine, to that extent, he had morning meditation classes. He was very, very adamant on the meditative aspect of Matsubayashi. Yes.
Unfortunately, that all got dropped later on. People might sit down for a few seconds or a couple of minutes and so on, but we always had, as a matter of fact, it was always 21 minutes because he didn't watch the time. He simply counted his breaths. He counted 100 breaths because he was facing us. The clock was behind him, but I watched the clock, and there was always 21 minutes, plus or minus a few seconds.
So he held morning meditation classes at the dojo.
Yes.
And
First informal, when I was there, it was still informal. He did them, and then later on, he got more involved in Zen, and he actually had a Zen monk to lead the meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That was after I was gone.
Did he not enforce that very much at the dojo? He didn't say to the students, you know, you need to do this or you have to do this. It was very.
He didn't force anybody really.
Mm-hmm.
He expected you to follow him, but if you didn't, it was your problem, not his type of thing. Yeah, it's a.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I took part in all these things because, after all, that's why I went to Japan for. I had been a member of a Zen temple in Toronto for a couple of years before I went, and so I knew the procedures and why, you know, the kind of breathing you have to have and all this kind of thing. So it was no problem for me, and because at that time I was flexible enough, I could sit and say so for 20 minutes and be able to get up. Nowadays I need somebody's help to get up, and I do that.
So people in the community could come to his morning meditation classes, I understand.
Yes. Yeah, some people came in and took part in the meditation, although they didn't take part in the karate class.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Just
karate people sometimes came after the meditation to join the class.
So I think we have a picture somewhere of that.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So is this something that you think should go back to Matsubayashi, be part of active Matsubayashi training in classes, is more of the meditation or?
This is the picture.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, meditation in the Hombu.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I think Michael's calling that up. There we go.
Yeah. Now, the other thing you asked about Nagamine Sensei and family and so on, he was a family man. And actually, he told me that your priorities in life should be your family, your work, and your karate. He said, never ever get the order mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
So karate should always come last to any other hobbies you have. This is your obligation to your family, and then your work, and then karate. So
there we go.
Yeah,
and where was this picture? Where was this picture taken?
Actually at the Haka, and some of like Martin and so on who was there would recognize it. And it's a family picnic. This was done in, I guess in the spring. Soke was not there anymore because he was in Tokyo at the time, but his younger brother is there. He's the one sitting in front of Nagamine Sensei. Next to Nagamine Sensei is his wife, and then a little boy who was part of the family, and then Michiko, who is Takeyoshi Nagamine's younger sister. And there was a woman who was somehow affiliated with the family, but I don't know whether she was a maid or whether she was an orphan that they picked up after the war, or whatever the case may be. I have no idea. So, she was older already. She was probably in her early 20s.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was that, and also sometimes with his some of his business friends, he went out and went to some of the sightseeing. He took them sightseeing in his car. And if he had room, he would take me along. I don't have a picture here right now, but I took. And then when we had visitors from Japan, sometimes we were on a tour, and I participated in that one as well. So, incidentally, visitors from Japan, sometimes some Japanese classes would come and practice with us. And I remember one of them, I think the whole bunch, probably 20 or 30 of them came. And they all passed Nagamine Sensei and all about us. Nagamine Sensei, so, oh my God. Because it's in Okinawa, it's a very rude thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Us is not, so Western students always do that too because they're trained by the Japanese. But, you do that in Okinawa, and it's very rude.
So you were in Okinawa. I think one of the pictures there was you at your birthday. You spent your 27th birthday in Okinawa.
Yeah, it's we had.
There's a picture there.
I always like the Japanese. I always like the Japanese dolls, and I and so when I was my 27th birthday, the students and Sensei got together and they got me one of those dolls. That's the one.
Yeah, there you go.
And
Again, big smile. Yeah.
and yeah, I still have that doll. It's in my former dojo, now man cave. But I said now I also have an Okinawan girlfriend. I said. So it was a party. We went to a restaurant and we had yeah, there were some other pictures that I didn't send you, but where yeah, you see people like Nakamura Sensei and some of the others. That, again, big smile on Nagamine Sensei's face. Just at the bottom right-hand corner is the guy, and his name was Miyagi, and he joined the dojo when he was 72 years old.
Oh wow!
And I hear he got his black belt when he was 78. So it shows that it's never too late to start.
Interesting. So you were saying earlier, you know, Sensei had business dealings. What did Sensei do? Like, he wasn't a full-time dojo owner at that time when you were there.
No, he was like most of the Okinawans. The dojo was in his house, and he yeah. So there was no. He didn't have far to go to it. Let's put it that way. And so, but yeah, he after the morning class he would usually leave and not come back until the evening unless he had something that we sometimes he had some time off and so on. He would stay. He would go over some kata with me or give me explanations for things like that. And interesting, he said, I think I mentioned it before, if it doesn't work in the dojo, why do you practice? If it doesn't work in the street, why do you practice it in the dojo? It has to be practical. And that practical down to earth is something that I've always valued in him. And I never quite bought into what Soka said, well, in the dojo you do this, but in the streets you would be doing this. And I'm opposed to this. I was just, it has to be the same in the street, and there's no difference between the street and the dojo. Whatever you are psychologically and physically in one year or the other. That's why the bows and everything in Okinawa was much more easygoing, because it was everyday type of thing rather than this very formal. Yeah, this kind of this, yeah. You'd the way you would bow to somebody in outside the dojo, you would also bow to the sensei. And that was something that was different. The whole impression I had of Okinawa was karate was much more part of daily life than it was in Japan. In Japan, it was always something very militaristic, something very formal. And Okinawa was much more informal because it was part of daily life. We had some girls in the dojo who took karate just as a preparation for training as Okinawan dancers, because of the relation between the two. And actually, Nagamine Sensei was a very good amateur dancer. He performed some dances sometimes, and people who were professional dancers were actually amazed how good he was. He very strongly felt the connection between the two.
Between karate and Okinawan dance. And yes. the unification of culture too, like he was very much, or karate very much.
Okay. Karate was part of Okinawan culture to him, and that it wasn't something. Oh, well, this is martial arts. This is the division wasn't really there. So in fact, I have some slides of Soke doing karate performances as part of Okinawan plays in some of the theaters. So.
And as I know, most of us know too, he came up with the Karate Sanka dance for the popular song.
Yeah. From what I understood, it was a poem, and then one Japanese singer wrote the melody, and then Nagamine Sensei created the dance for it. So something like that. Yeah, the picture is still on the 45 RPM envelope. There was the insert for that shows the man who sang the song.
So getting to a couple of questions that people had submitted earlier. One question was asking about, in your opinion, what advice from Nagamine Sensei would he give practitioners today or Sensei today? You know, what would he be able to, what would he want us to know as in future generations? What would be his advice, you know, with regards to doing karate?
Well, you should always practice as hard as you feel you can,
Mm-hmm.
and even push yourself to some degree, but not overdo it. And one nasty rumor that was in Okinawa at the time is that the Shorei people died young and the Shorin people lived a long life, because the Shorei people had all these hard dynamic tension exercises and all this kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but the Shorin people moved easily and much more naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the Shorei masters got quite old too, but the fact that Chibana died when he was over 80, he was the Kobayashi master.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about Hohanzo Ken, but yeah, certainly Nagamine Sensei lived to 90 and he still practiced until almost the time he died.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that it's something you can do for a long time, as long as you're reasonable about it. If you go all out and really damage your body on the way. I had before I went actually, when I was working, the maintenance guy at the place where I was working was the North American Indian, full-blooded Indian, but he was also an professional wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, Frank, be careful, because any injuries you've had in your youth will come back to haunt you once you pass 50. And that's something that I find very true. Yeah, okay, I've got some arthritis in my hands now, but I think rather from karate, because of where it is, that wasn't the stress in karate, but it was when I was still doing judo and was doing breakfalls. It's I don't think from karate. I stopped punching makiwara because I started feeling some things in my knuckles, and I didn't want to risk losing the ability in my hands, because I was working in electronics and I had to work with small components to define circuits and all this kind of thing. So I couldn't risk damaging my hands. And so I know my punches are not what some of the Okinawans are, or even some of the people here who train very hard. But yeah, you often pay for it later on, and it's hard to say. It's the same thing as some people smoking and live to be over 100, and other people smoke for 2 years and end up with lung cancer. It's hard to predict. Maybe someday a DNA test will show what you're susceptible to, but right now we can't predict it. So why take the risk? Yeah. Do it reasonably. Yeah, like make it part of your everyday routine. There's some German liquor that had a slogan about drink it within limits, but do it every day type of thing. Use it every day, and that's basically what it is. Yeah, and I find that the training here quite often, where people have 1 or 2 classes a week, and they're pushed really hard. That's very harmful on the body, because your body. Then you take it easy the rest of the time trying to recover from this, and then you get this hit again, rather than a much more steady. And that's why the Japanese can train harder, because they train every day. The classes, most people did at least 6 days a week, if not 7 days if they were in the morning class. But it's a more measured type of thing. Your body can take that because it's used to it. It's not this hit every 1 or 2 classes a week and then nothing.
So with Nagamine Sensei giving questions to practitioners, what about dojo owners? What was his thought with, or I don't know if you ever discussed anything with him, but what do you feel?
A couple of things. First of all, the dojo owners should still be practicing and understand that they're not masters yet. Yeah, so in fact, the students will catch up to you if you take it easy. And that's so your responsibility is to stay ahead of them, but also treat your students with respect. Yeah, and like one of his piece of advice to me was, when you correct a student, find 2 bad things and 3 good things. Okay, so when the student is encouraged, because the 3 good things mean he's on average he's improving, but he still has some way to go because of 2 bad things. Okay, so and Nagamine-sensei was very good in that. He understood human nature really well, and worked with that. I mean, even with my own moods, I was very homesick at Christmas time. That was the first Christmas away from home, and so on. Yeah. So he called me into the kitchen and sat down, and he cooked some sukiyaki, and we had eggnog and sukiyaki for as a Christmas celebration, just the 2 of us. You know, or sometimes he felt I was down a bit and said, "Come on, let's go for lunch," and he would take me to a restaurant. He would pay, and yeah. So he really seemed to care about me, and that was something that I think he understood. He was very tuned to my moods, and knew when I was down a bit and all this kind of thing. And I think that's essential for a martial arts person, because as Sun Tzu said, you have to understand your enemy. Okay? And if you understand your enemy and you understand yourself, then you win every battle. Even in Nagamine's way, where both of you win, because you can't win if you don't understand why the other one is doing what he's doing. And the same principles, of course, apply in daily life. And when you deal with people at work, when you deal with people in your family and so on, understand why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah. Is there a way that you can find that both of you can live with? And so on. So I think he was a very good amateur psychologist. I don't think he ever took any formal training in that, but he just had a sense of how somebody feels, what mood somebody's in. And when you are in that kind of position, you can stop a fight long before it even starts.
Having that intuition.
And karate is useful in daily life. I've used it many times ever since I came back from Okinawa. And I feel this is where the true value of karate is, because that's what you need every day.
Not necessarily defending against, you know.
No, we put too much emphasis on, oh, this isn't as effective. We should be doing it this way. That would be more effective. Effective for what? I've taken karate almost 60 years now, and then next January it'll be 60 years. Okay? I've never once been in an actual fight. I've talked my way out of it a few times, but I've never been in an actual physical fight in all that time. But I've applied karate many times in either getting out of a fight or simply agreeing with the other guy that, yeah, he could beat me. Yeah, okay. If he wants to believe that, that's fine. It doesn't do me any harm. It doesn't matter to me. But same thing, I said a few times to students when I went through a divorce 40 years ago, it was like that. Not making mistakes. Why is she doing what she's doing? Don't antagonize things and make them worse for yourself. My ex-wife was always afraid I would, a new boyfriend and I would meet sometime, and I would be a hell of a fight. I knew to avoid that, because I would have lost the custody of the kids if I got into a physical fight with them. So you can keep your cool in this thing, because you can keep your actual goal in mind and not destroy things in this. This was the serious kung fu. The guy said, if you act in revenge, then you might as well dig 2 graves, one for the other and one for yourself. Something along those lines.
So again, the value being, again, less physical, although the physicality is there, but definitely having more of that intrinsic value. That,
I mean, physically, yes, I've benefited a lot. I'm 81 now, and I can still move almost normally as I did in my younger years. I'm not in as good a shape now, but I still walk normally. I don't have a walker, so many people don't even need a cane. And so it's I still lead a reasonably normal life. I can pick up my granddaughter and play with her and stuff like that. Most people my age don't. So I think if Sensei didn't have the stroke when he was a bit younger, then at 90 he would have been much more bright too. But because he also lost one eye to glaucoma, so his distance judgment wasn't there anymore, and stuff like that. And so it impeded his life. But yeah, it's, I mean, he still did a dance. I have a video of him doing his karate dance and some other Okinawan dances at the age of 89 in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think Nagamine Sensei had an aim or a goal for his foreign students? Maybe thinking in terms of knowing that karate is going to spread, it's going to grow, it's going to spread to different parts of the world from this small island. Do you think he had a goal in mind for expansion, or maybe, you know, for his foreign students in particular, like he knew that there was going to be a time where you would be going back and you'd be teaching this. So you asked a lot of questions and he gave you answers that maybe he wouldn't be doing necessarily with his own Okinawan students. What about other instructors, other North American instructors, or other foreign instructors? Do you think he had an objective in his expansion, or his expansion may not be the best word, but his propagation of karate?
He did have a hope that his karate would bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
To a large degree, it's done that, but unfortunately, in many cases, it's also divided us.
Mm-hmm.
Which, one question I think that somebody had is about what would you think about all these people splitting off and making their own? It's like it happened between some of the top people in Okinawa too. Yeah, Arakaki Sensei and Taira Sensei are not teaching the same way or the same things necessarily, but they respect each other. And they said, yes, okay, you're his students, that's fine, do it his way, type of thing, rather than, no, he's wrong, and you should be doing it this way. And that kind of thing is something that we should be doing, rather than saying, oh no, they're all wrong, and I want to have my own style, and I'm the master now, and so on, as some of the people in Okinawa and the West have done. They think they should be the top, and they should be the master, and they know better than the other guys, and so on. No, we should accept the fact that everybody is different, has a different mentality, and because of that, this karate will be different too. And we can still come together in the basic things, like the naturalness of Matsubayashi. I've often felt like Zen philosophy is sort of putting aside all the distractions and going straight to the matter of things, the heart of things, and trying to see things in their true light without all the distractions that only distort your vision. Okay, and I felt in many ways karate, Matsubayashi is the closest karate to that idea that I've seen. And that's why Nagamine's techniques are so direct and so natural. Okay? Using the natural stance much more often. Even simple things like we had going into a yoi position, for instance. Okay? You hear, you bow, and then pinan, okay, yoi. Okay? There's none of this type of thing. Now, that changed later on. People got much more formal. I think there was Japanese influence there, and they tried to make karate more like other karate, so it would be more palatable to people. Because one thing I've always had a problem with since I came back is explaining to people Okinawan karate and Japanese karate are not the same. The Okinawans, it's a more everyday life. It's a more informal because it is part of everyday life. And not something totally separate from the rest of your life. It's a formality it sort of tries to implicate. And that is something that most people don't understand. There's very few students I've had over the more than 50 years I've taught it in Canada now that have actually understood that. Oh, this is karate, this has to be done this way. No, it doesn't have to be done this way. It's a
question about, someone had asked about Kobudo Was there a lot of Kobudo practiced in the 60s when you were at the dojo? Was there a number of people practicing, you know, bo, sai, kama? Was it done during class, after class?
Okay, Kobudo was never done during class.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, I never ever saw Sensei take a weapon. I don't even know if he knew some of them. I know his dojo was called Karate and Kobudo Dojo, but Kushi Sensei was into the Tuifa, Tongfa, and Kyang Sensei was into Sai and Bo, and then some other people did nunchaku and so on. So it was something that was outside that. It wasn't karate, but it was related to karate because so many techniques, unarmed techniques, came out of using these weapons. After the weapons were outlawed, you just simply did them with a, instead of the side block, you did a block this way. It's a modification in some ways. There's a strong connection between the two, but it was never actually practiced in the dojo. At least not. I saw it in demonstrations, and like several times a week in the evenings, there would be a demonstration in the dojo because physically, Nagamine Sensei's dojo was the largest in Naha at the time, and there was a tourist bus coming around with Japanese tourists. Yeah, and that was part of the evening tour, watching a karate class. So Nagamine Sensei, I guess, made some extra money from that, and so they quite often had the demonstration, and that's when I saw a lot of Kobudo. But it was never actually part of the class, and it was never part of the grading either.
And it was totally optional. It was something that people could approach the instructors and say, I would like to learn this, or?
Yeah, I learned Kobudo from different ways. I learned the nunchaku from Matsubayashi, who taught the evening class. I learned the sai from Ahagon, who was one of the people doing sai quite a bit, and there was a couple of brothers who were very good with the bow. I learned from them. So those are the three weapons I learned: sai, bow, and nunchaku. Didn't learn the tongue.
So along with that, was there any talk or any work on, say, chi or intrinsic energy taught in the dojo? Is that something that Nagamine Sensei addressed, or was it something that might be introduced afterwards as part of karate training? What was his thoughts on?
I don't know if it was ever introduced because I wasn't that advanced, and it didn't really come up that much. It was never actually formally taught. Let's put it that way. I know Nagamine Sensei must have been familiar with it because I watched him do some Matsubayashi with students not part of the dojo, but somebody would come in from the street and had some problems with the knee or something because he would do some Matsubayashi. You can't do that unless you know pressure points, energy flow, T, and so on. A couple of days before I left, he said, okay, you're leaving now and you won't get any more Matsubayashi instructions for the foreseeable future. How do you intend to continue your training? And I said, I was thinking maybe you're taking some Aikido to learn how to use the ki for, and so on. And he said, you don't have to take Aikido, it's all in karate too. And he actually demonstrated movements that you would have normally thought were Aikido, except it ended in a karate ending. But the way he avoided things and dealt with an attack was exactly the way an Aikido person would. And really, subsequently, I found that Matsubayashi is the closest to Aikido that any karate style can get. Because we don't deal with an attack straight on. We avoid. We don't really block in that sense. When you say block and we translate uke as a block, you think here comes an attack and you stop it. But Matsubayashi never does that. Okay. I mean, ukeru in Japanese means more receiving. Yeah, in judo you talk about the tori and the uke. The uke is the one that gets thrown. The tori is the one that does the throwing. So it's you receive the opponent's attack and deal with it. You don't actually block it, and that of course changes the whole picture, because you can be physically far weaker than the opponent is and the attacker is, and still be victorious, because you're not fighting force with force. Yeah? You're avoiding the attack, and if just like in judo, you turn it against him. Because now he's got the arm out, or he's got this unbalanced because he didn't actually hit you as he expected, and things like this. And, it's very easy to pull him off balance at that point. So the kuzushi that you have in judo, you have in karate just as well, and those kind of things. So it's a somewhat different approach. And if you're fighting defensively, as you should be in karate, you have the advantage of the other, because you deal with a known attack, and you can redirect his attack in such a way that it goes against him. Okay? If you're the attacker, you fight into the unknown, you have no way. So this, in karate ni sentanashi principle, is not only a philosophical thing, it's a very practical thing. Because the attacker fights into the unknown, the defender defends against something that they can see. And that's why they say if two people are evenly matched, the one who attacks will lose.
So Sensei, we're getting on time. It's 20 after 9 our time. And I want to take some questions from people that maybe they have something that, you know, you've been talking about and they want a little bit further information, or maybe something that they have already asked. There's something that just popped up on my screen and then left again. It's gone. Do you have any advice from you for people moving on in the future in Matsubayashi? How can we kind of preserve Nagamine Sensei's Matsubayashi? What can we do to preserve that and carry it forward into the next century? What would our responsibility be to pass that on?
First of all, like in karate, we say we shouldn't have the first attack. Okay, you can't have a tournament without attacking. Yeah, you get penalized for not being aggressive enough in the tournament if you constantly fight defensively. So this is something that most of us fight tournaments for a while, and then we get out of it. A, we get too old. B, we get too many injuries that bother us, and so on. And then we say, well, there must be more to it than that, or else we quit and take up golf or something like this. So this is something that the main benefit comes as you're older. So your karate should be a bit more measured. You shouldn't overdo it in your youth that you'd basically destroy your body. But take the long-term view. Nagamine Sensei was still doing karate at the age of 90. And many other people did too. Shibana was well over 80, I think, when he died. So people will practice that long. I certainly hope to. I'm 81 now, so I have no intention of quitting it. I hope to reach Nagamine Sensei's age, and so be practicing at that point. That's my next goal.
So thinking long term,
gradual. Yeah, and you have to do it. That's where the main benefits are. So keep moving, but keep it within reason. Like, don't stress your body to the point where you do permanent damage, which comes up again. Somebody once said that any injury you've had comes back to bother you once you're over 50 or so. Don't stress your body to the point where you actually benefit from it, where you strengthen your body, but don't overdo it. Don't act like an animal, and then you find you can't keep it up and say, well, okay, I'll take up golf, or I'll take up something else. That's not as hard on my body. You should be doing it in a way that you can keep on doing it. Yeah, you slow down a bit at age. Certainly I can't do a lot of things I could do anymore at age 30. But yeah, I'm 81 now. I don't have any intention of quitting.
So life preserving and life enhancing.
Yeah, I mean, Nagamine Sensei was 90 when he died, and if he hadn't had the that stress from the festivities that he had to organize when he was 90, because he was the oldest and the most senior of the masters at the time. If he hadn't had that stress, then he probably would have lived longer than the 90. It took too much out of him. So.
Another question, Sensei. During your time in Okinawa, when the instructors were teaching, or Nagamine Sensei was teaching, did he favor certain kata when he was teaching? Maybe, did he do one or two of the Pinan kata and maybe only occasionally did some of the other ones? Did he concentrate on certain, maybe more basic kata, but maybe leave more of the advanced ones? Or did he practice all of them? Did he teach all of them? Did you do all of them in class every time?
We only did the Fukigatas, Pinans, and Aihanshis in class. All the other katas were practiced outside of class. So I paid some of the more advanced students to teach me some of these katas, especially the guy who taught the evening class, Matayoshi. I paid him regularly to teach me. So $5 an hour or something like that at the time, which was a lot for the Okinawans when they were making $25-30 a month. $5 an hour is a lot, so they were quite willing to do it, and that's where I learned my so-called black belt katas. In the class, we never did those.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Sensei? Again, it is almost 9:30 and we're looking at wrapping up fairly soon. But again, if you have any questions, just... All right. So some people have been saying thank you very much. Again, very amazing. Yeah, amazing information. Fantastic. Does anybody have any technical questions about Matsubayashi necessarily, for Sensei, or maybe Nagamine Sensei's view on things, any historical things, any cultural things, anything people are interested in or maybe want to talk a little bit further about?
One thing I'd like to mention is that the proportion of things, of the sequence of the class has changed. Because with Grandmaster Nagamine, it was 20% warm-ups and basics, 60% kata, 20% strengthening exercises, and then wrap-up cool-down type of exercises. And he stuck quite religiously to that. But that meant an awful lot of katas. Yeah, in an hour and a half class, we're talking basically an hour spent on kata. So that something that didn't go over too well in the West, and I think Soke changed it to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So because Westerners always want a lot more exercise. Oh, we got to work out hard and all this kind of thing. Well, put more effort into the kata if you want to work out hard. You can do 10 katas and basically collapse, or you can do 100 katas and not even feel it. The kata is a hell of an exercise if you apply it properly. I did a test at one time at New Year. The dojo was closed for a couple of days, New Year celebrations, and since I lived at the dojo, and I went down and I did fukikata each really hard. Like I didn't warm up. I just did it as hard as I possibly could, and I was sore for a couple of days after, all over my body. The arms were sore, the chest was sore, the legs were sore, everything was sore, showing how much of an exercise a kata can actually be if you really put everything into it. And they say you can't do more than 10 katas that way without collapsing, because it just takes too much out of your body. So if you put enough exercise in it and enough effort into it, you can. That's one hell of an exercise. You don't need auxiliary things like push-ups and weight training and so on. The weight training in Okinawa is only done to make you reach your optimum weight. Okay? Nagamine Sensei did the research and he said, okay, he researched all the Olympic athletes and so on, and he found that if you take your height in centimeters and your height in centimeters and deduct 100, that should be your weight in kilograms.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 176 or something like this, 178. So if I take 100 off that, I should be weighing 78 kilograms. So at the moment, I weigh a bit more than that. So, but he said that seems to be the optimum weight, the trade-off between having enough weight to back up your technique and having too much to be able to do it efficiently. So within 10 pounds of that particular measurement. So there was things like that. And we did some weight training to build up a bit of bulk so we could back up our technique.
Mm-hmm.
I gained about 20 pounds actually in the dojo in the 8 months I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I was very skinny when I went. I weighed 135 pounds and I left the weight 155 because it was the weight training and with barbells, dumbbells, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always done after the main part of the class, after the katas, because he didn't want you to be tired when you did katas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what this one German guy said. It doesn't matter if you have to crawl out of the dojo on your nipples. Yeah, at that point, you can be as tired as you want to. It doesn't matter anymore. But if you're tired at the beginning because the warm-up exercises are too long or too hard, you can't do a good job in kata.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's so yeah.
So another question, Sensei. I have two more questions here. So one question was, what was Nagamine Sensei's view of females training at the dojo? Did you see a lot of females training at the dojo, besides the one that you mentioned earlier about people getting, and working on technique for dance? But
no, there was none. His own daughter wasn't training either, Michiko, and I only saw occasional females at the dojo. At that time, it was basically a male sport. Nowadays, it's more, and some people like, there are some very good females now. And really, I've often told the people to train more like females, because males, we tend to be strong, we want to be, we got all these muscles, you have to do it hard and so on. Females don't have that strength, so they're more fluent and do it more with technique rather than with muscles. And that's the way we should be moving in karate. Mm-hmm. It's a very relaxed and type of thing, okay? I asked Nagamine Sensei once, do you really need this long thing to do a middle block? And he said, no. And he had me hold out the arm. And all he did was, and I had a big bruise on it for 2 weeks. That was it. So you don't need this type of thing. Okay? Mm-hmm. At the beginning you do, but eventually you just, okay? That's it. And you develop whole strengths just at the focus point rather than this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So really, as you get better, your movements should become shorter
and smaller, and more refined.
I remember Arakaki doing Nahanchi, and he didn't do this. He just said, okay, it's just a shot. That's it. Rather than this, you don't need that long pass. You need just a short focus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sensei, did Nagamine Sensei ever talk about how he came up and developed Fukigata-ichi? What were his thoughts? Did he ever discuss that with you, or do you have any information on how he came up with that, how he developed that?
No, Fukigata-ichi is very basic exercises, very basic movements, and the only thing I know is that he was asked by the governor of Okinawa to come up with simple exercises to do in the schools, and they asked both him and Miyagi Sensei to come up with things, and Nagamine Sensei came up with Fukigata-ichi, Miyagi Sensei with Fukigata-ni. So those two are we are the only Shorin style actually that does Fukigata-ni. Mm-hmm. Because of the admiration that Nagamine Sensei had for his senior Tojo Miyagi. the two were friends, and actually I think it was Miyagi who recommended him for Renshi rank at the time.
With the Budokan Kai,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that because of his admiration for Nagamine Sensei, for Miyagi Sensei, he Matsubayashi practices both katas. But the other shonen styles don't do that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, Sensei, it is about time we wrap up, about 9:30, and we definitely don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we definitely would like to do this again sometime. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves. I hope everybody got a lot out of this. Any final thoughts or final words, Sensei, that you'd like to tell anybody, talk to anybody about?
Yeah, this question always comes up about has things changed very much? In many ways it has, I think. Now, Nagamine Sensei was never adverse to change. He said change is necessary for anything to grow and develop. He said, if I say my karate cannot change, this is the way it is. This is why I was hesitating writing the book even. If I say my karate should be this way and no change is allowed, he said my karate will die, because anything that's alive will always change and develop. So yeah, the change itself is good, but he said that just make sure whatever you change is an improvement. And I think this is where things often fall down, because and you should understand the basic concepts of karate, the idea of the natural and dead angle, the relaxed type of movements, the mobility that Matsubayashi has, and most of the shonen styles do, but Matsubayashi to even greater extent. Yeah, because we're less formal than some of the styles. To deal with things easily by changing the angle on the person. You know, as you said, move out of the natural angle of the opponent, but keep him in your natural angle, so that you can attack easily. You have all the possibilities, but he doesn't anymore. So it's a maneuvering that is important in Matsubayashi, rather than standing there and, you're going to block this hard, you know, and so on. Now we did the kumite about banging the arms together and so on, the tanden kumite, but yeah, the Okinawans always delighted beating me up because it's big Westerner and they could beat him up, that kind of thing. But yeah, eventually my arms got tough enough that I could give him back as good as I got. But no, it's yeah, no, this is something that Matsubayashi is natural, and this thing of the connection between the street and the dojo, that everything should be the same. Whatever you do in one should apply in the other, and so on. Whatever you learn in the dojo, you should be able to apply in the street. Whatever you learn in the street, you should be able to apply in the dojo. Okay, there is no division between the two of them. And that is something that he stressed very much, and I feel Matsubayashi in many ways, being perhaps the most natural of all the shonen styles, sort of is amenable to that kind of thing.
All right, so Sensei, we're going to call it a day. Where'd you go? There you go. Thank you very, very much. You disappeared from my screen for a second. Thank you very much for taking the time and spending with us this morning. You know, you and I talk quite often about these things, and I think this is important that you know, this you know, incredible information that you have gets spread out, and other people hear it as well. I think it's just, again, fantastic. So again, thank you very, very much. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves, and thank you very much for taking time out of your day to listen to Sensei. And
if anybody has questions, you can always email me too. You know, it's fbaehr@bell.net.
And we'll post that as well. Yeah, what we'll do is we'll make up a video. So I'm looking at, hopefully by tomorrow, I'll have a quick edited video that we can send out to everybody. And I'll make sure that I attach a link to Sensei Baehr's email. If you want to email him directly and ask further questions or any concerns or anything like that, you can definitely talk to him a little bit more.
Some of you could already communicate with me, like Martin O'Malley has contacted me directly a few times, and and so on. We've been corresponding, some of the people in Germany as well. So yeah, and you're always welcome to do that, and I'll try to answer it as quickly as I can. If I don't, then I usually forget about it. So that's why I usually try to answer as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you very much. Thank you for spending time with us today. And we look forward to doing this again in the future. All right, have a fantastic day, everyone. Enjoy your weather. Hopefully it's sunny where you are, except for in Ireland. Hopefully everybody enjoys the rest of their day.
But Ireland has to say the Green Ireland, the Green Island. So without enough rain, it won't stay green.
I think they get their fair
Canada
share.
will go brown after a while.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes. Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Bye.